Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's Word of Truth. Kerry and I met just about 6 years ago when I moved to El Paso, Texas, and we were working together. And it was our work relationship that brought us together as friends, and it was our life journey that has caused that friendship to evolve over the years. So, Kerry, I am just so honored that you are joining us tonight. So I always start out by asking our guests to tell us who they are. And I know that you've watched a couple of our interviews, so you know when I ask that question, I don't want to know where you were, your career, what's on your CV or your resume. I want to know who you are.
I know exactly what you mean, Michelle. And I just, first and foremost, what an honor that you have asked me to be on this series. Like I'm still trying to get that into my head. Like after listening to your prior guests, I mean, talking about Rose Wright Scott and the one after her talking about reverse engineering.
Yeah,
I don't remember his name, but that gentleman,
Keith Gamble. Yeah,
right. He blew me away. He has some parts of his story that look so much like mine that I don't even know what to do with it. But It was just really, really amazing. But to answer your question, that's not an easy question to answer. It's really not. I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I gotta tell you that, like, first and foremost, I think it's really important to say that I am not always the person that I want to be, right? The person that I feel that I am meant to be. There are other forces at play, right? But that being said, I do think that I am a person who is looking for the truth. I am interested in not just my truth and my experience. I am looking for the truth, right? And so I'm always striving to look for that. You have really helped me in my journey in looking for that. Like you've been a really key part of that. So I'm just really excited and grateful to be on this amazing project of yours today.
I always say, there's a scripture that says iron sharpens iron. And so I do believe that God brings us together and allows our paths to cross, and the iron of who I am and the iron of who you are. I mean, that friction just makes us better, just makes us sharper, cleaner, more fine-tuned. So it's a mutual.
Well, thing. Wherever you go, you tend to attract these irons. So I just I'm excited to be part of the club, and I'm just hoping you're going to have a big social one day where all the people you have collected through your years can all be in one spot and we can all meet each other.
That would be pretty amazing. So just so everybody knows, Kerry has two wonderful human beings who happen to be her children. They chose her, and she and her husband chose them, Izzy and Mateo. And they are in this season of my life, they are my adopted children, so much to the point where I've given them nicknames. I call them T-Dat and Yaddy.
Yes, they earned those names. They earned them.
Exactly. So one day I was supposed to be, as most people would say, babysitting T-Dat and Yaddy, but I just don't feel like the term babysitter fits me. Mm-hmm. So I said I was holding them. Mm. I was just holding them for a while, yes. and we all had to embrace that understanding that Aunt Michelle doesn't babysit; she holds little people for a while, yes. And they were just so cool with that.
Michelle, Auntie Michelle, you must know though that like I am only holding them as well. I know that you know that.
There you go.
I'm only holding them as well, and if I'm going to speak of myself and who I am in spiritual terms, I would still include the word mother. Yeah, I really would, because that has been the premier challenge of my life. Mm-hmm. It truly has in so many ways. And it has created a window into improvements that I never knew needed to be made. But if they weren't made, there is no way that I could answer the call that has been held out to me.
To be somebody's mom. My mother always said that when she had my brother and I, that she had no knowledge of how to raise children. No. And she simply said she learned as we moved along. And
yes, And I hold them just as you held them that day. Like that is all I do. They are not any more mine than they are yours, than they are your producers or my husband's, or they're just not. They belong to God just like I do and just like you do. And it is my job simply to try to help them step towards who they are. Now that can create some mass confusion sometimes, but I had a woman in my life, is a very important person in my life, who said that, confusion is not of God. It is not of God. There's been times in my life, and I would argue that I think she has a point in that there's always something inside that knows the answer, but there's always, frequently anyway, so much noise that can conceal what we already know.
Yeah. It seems to me, okay, and I love the fact that you struggle with answering the question, who I am, because it's not a simple question. It's a very complicated question. And oftentimes I think when we are very quick to answer it, it's when we're talking about some very surface and as judgmental as this may sound, some very shallow aspects of our identity. But the aspects of those of us who have come into this world for purpose, on purpose, and some of it may be to be somebody's mom, somebody's dad, as a friend, as a daughter, as a person who walks side by side with another along life's journey. Just that iron, up against iron, just helping us to be the better people that we are. Once I've known you just about 6 years, as I said earlier, and in that time, you have gone through several evolutions, several iterations, and that's just in 6 years' time. Okay, and yet there is a whole seasons of iterations that came before I was blessed to have you in my life and have to be honored to be in your life. And so, talk about how you got where you are. All right. I remember one day you told me when I was talking about my Blackness, and I was like, yeah, and I said something, you may not get that. You were like, girl, I was probably like the only white person in my Black high school. Okay.
I was definitely not the only white person in my high school, but my high school was a large percentage Black.
Right.
And one of the things that I may or may not have shared with you, Michelle, but and then I will get to your question, but this is a key part of it too, is that I was in, honors classes and whatnot in my high school. In my high school, that was majority African American, right? But in my classes, there was only one other African American student.
Interesting.
And I think about this now. It is interesting. Do we think it's because there weren't gifted and talented African American young men and women in that high school? No, that was not the case. That was not the case. I knew personally for that not to be the case, right?
How is it that you have a majority Black high school and the percentage of folk in honors classes are white folk?
Yeah.
But
there's something wrong.
But there's something rare about you to be able to truthfully and honestly have that observation and be willing to step outside of it and critique it as you were a part of that experience. So that's something very rare about you. Yeah.
Well, this is an iteration, right? This is an iteration that I've been through that has not always been that way. And when I say I'm a striver and a truth seeker, I suppose what I mean by that is I make an attempt to stay open to new information as it comes to me. And one of the, one of the many iterations in my life, I grew up in a very small town. I grew up in the 70s and 80s and early 90s in a very small town where there was an African American population, and then there were white people who didn't make a lot of money, right? And so they were sort of almost pitted against each other. And now as I grow older, I can see that these patterns are I don't know necessarily by design, but they certainly are self-perpetuating, right? They're self-perpetuating. And, to get to your question though, how did I get where I am? So I guess if you could maybe tell me a little bit more about what path? Which
What
journey do you want to hear about?
Whichever you want to share, whichever. This whole conversation is about those of us who have been blessed enough to overcome challenges, trials,
Okay.
trauma, whatever it is in our path. And for everybody that I've talked with, everybody that I've been in conversation with, that overcoming has been different.
Okay.
And so whatever it is, that you want to be
Okay.
able to.
So, we talk a little bit about race relations and that sort of thing. And as a child, that was one of many factors that made me uncomfortable in my surroundings. And when I say uncomfortable, I mean uncomfortable, as in, I don't know. I think there may have been something about me, and I had an inability to connect. I genuinely had an inability to connect. And I do not necessarily know where that came from, but I do think there were some environmental factors that contributed. There were probably some individual personality factors that contributed. But I do know that when I went away to college, I had the notion in my head, I am going to be happy. I will be happy.
Let's pause. Let me back you up for a minute. When you say you had an inability to connect, was that with everyone in general, or certain people, race relations, or just as a human being? Yeah.
I think as a human being, and it manifested first with my family. I felt separate. I felt apart. I felt different than. I was a very shy kid. I was a pretty bright kid. And so I just I always felt that there was something wrong with me. And, I didn't feel that I fit into my family. I didn't feel that I fit into my community, but I didn't have the words around that, right? I like to use the analogy. I was a fish swimming in, I don't know, say red water. When the fish is in red water, the fish doesn't know that it's red water, right? Until maybe this fish swims into some blue water or whatnot. And so when I get to college and I start experimenting with drugs and alcohol, for the first time, I knew what it was like to not be in red hot water. Like that was the first time that I experienced some kind of what I did not know at the time was a false connection, but that was my experience of connection, of warmth and relaxation. And I always thought of it as a feeling of like, I can finally be home. Like I've always just sort of looked for somewhere I can be comfortable and be at
And it was the drugs and alcohol that gave you that feeling.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so I proceeded to chase that relentlessly until I had spiraled myself into a very, very dark pit, because we all know where that goes, right? It is not a solution. It is not I shouldn't even say that. It was a solution for me at the time, but I didn't realize it was a solution to a problem that I had. I thought it was simply me having fun finally. And this is how I can have fun. This is how I can, there's so much beneath. When an alcoholic addict tells you that drugs and alcohol enable them to have fun, what that means for us is that we were finally able to sit in front of another human being and engage with them and really be able to have a friendship or some good times. Some of the things that we in our minds consider a good time. I don't know a single other alcoholic addict. I have never heard one tell a story that did not include somewhere in it a feeling different as a kid, or a feeling it. So many of them come from settings of extreme trauma. But there is a spectrum of it, right? There's a spectrum of it. And I still, to this day, I could search through my childhood history until the day I lay down to die for a reason. But I don't know what the reason was. I do know that like I said, there's probably a number of things that contributed to it, but I did feel very much disconnected and very much alone, to the point that I did not know that until I was able to relieve that feeling. Right. And so that is what I was, when I got into treatment, I don't know, the 13th time or so, when I got into that treatment center and I was finally ready to do something about this, I heard one of our instructors at that treatment center say that, this these drugs and alcohol are serving as relief. That word relief just kind of blew me away. I had no idea. That I was trying to relieve something. And it took years of recovery before I could finally wrap my mind around that. And, in one of these more recent iterations, I had discovered, we were talking about race relations and whatnot, and I have discovered that that was a part of it. I come from just a culture in which there's a separateness. And in this most recent iteration, I am looking to reverse that separateness within myself first. And then in whatever way I am called to do so in my environment and in the people I am called. The St. Francis prayer starts with, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Everything, literally everything that I strive to do in my life today can be summed up somewhere in that St. Francis prayer. And that very first line kind of says the rest of the entire prayer in one sentence.
Right. So just in this conversation, we've gone from talking about, first of all, the gift of your being here on this earth plane, the gift of being one who has been trusted with holding children, young lives in your care. The context of a family setting, a social setting, a world setting where you didn't feel like you fit in. The whole high school thing with the race relations and separateness and whatever all comes with that and the way that it plays itself out. Then you, with your brilliant mind, you go away to college and you find your relief. Okay. And here it is many years later that you're at a point where you are investing in eradicating the separateness, whether that's separateness in race, separateness, whatever it is.
Yes.
How does somebody go there and come here? I mean, how? And how do you understand that? Do you understand that yet? I'm not saying you.
Yes, thank you for that part of the question, because the answer is no, I don't.
No.
I don't, because I cannot create wisdom that doesn't, I can't share wisdom that I don't have just yet. But I do know that that there were several instances in which I very much should not have made it. There were overdoses. There were times when, and the crazy thing, Michelle, is that even now, I feel like even in recent history that they say that God cheats for alcoholics, right? God cheats for alcoholics. I feel that there have been such extreme interventions by God in my life that sometimes I wonder if literally there aren't actual manipulations of the space-time continuum in order to keep me on this plane for whatever it is that I need to be doing next, or to get me channeled into the next right path. I mean, things have happened that I cannot explain.
So for all intents and purposes, you're supposed to be dead. Like
Absolutely.
Dead a lot of times dead.
Absolutely.
Right?
In fact, I'm pretty sure there was twice when I was, probably technically. And of course I wasn't around to monitor the
right. Okay.
What's that? Yeah. So there is something, and I'll throw this out there because it sticks with me. And one of these days, maybe I'll understand it. But I had a very spiritual man who was also, he reminds me actually of myself now, but rewind about 14 years ago when I first, or 13 or so years ago, when I first entered the recovery center where he worked. And he was a director of this recovery center. And I had a roommate who was, shooting up or whatever in the space that we shared together. And I was, after my
And you
sobriety,
you were in recovery.
yes, yes. And I was in a residential facility at the time, and I was after it with all of my might, and there was nothing going to stop me at that point. And so I went to speak with this director, his name was Gerald, in order to ensure that I was safe against this. And I said, well, why? Like, and he started to do the paperwork to out process this person. And when I said, why do we have to do this? Like, why is it that we have to keep doing this to ourselves? Because and he said, Kerry, some must die in order that others can live.
Wow. Wow.
I don't know what that, I still to this day, I have an inkling in that maybe it means that in order for us to understand the seriousness of what we do to ourselves in the name of searching simply to understand that we are not separate, but we are in fact part of something bigger than ourselves. In that desperate search, some have to die in order for some of us to be able to see it. And let me tell you, we were talking just the other day about arrogance. The one who walks away from that, being given that gift of being allowed to be one of the ones who get to live and not handing it right back, unutterable. Unutterable. I will not be that arrogant person.
That was an amazingly authentic, real, cut to the marrow, to the bone, life sharing. And for those who are listening or watching, we took a break because I think we all needed it in that moment because that was so moving. And so, Kerry, I want to say thank you for taking us to that place. And in your sharing, when you talked about your director who said to you that sometimes someone has to die in order for others to live, most folk know that I get to God through Jesus Christ. And a part of my faith tradition is the understanding that Jesus Christ, an innocent man, died so that the rest of us could live, or as I like to say, would know how to live. And I have to admit that I wrestle with that as a part of my own understanding, my Christology, my theology, that why it is that an innocent man, an innocent anybody, has to go through that kind of suffering so that the rest of us can figure it out. And so when you share that story about what your director said, it touches me in that kind of way. But the good news is that you got a lot of what those of us who are in my tradition don't get, is that the fact that if someone died so that I can see that suffering, so that I could see that death, and out of it comes my understanding of what it really means to live. And as the scripture says, to live abundantly. And as you say, to walk away and not get that is the height of arrogance. To really think that we are here of our own doing because we are just that great, we're just that wonderful, that there is no fault in us whatsoever is really, really the height of arrogance. So I applaud you for walking away with that and for providing us with that kind of teaching. I have a question, and it is, in all of these iterations and all of these evolutions, and I just like the fact that we're able to talk about that, because I'm often trying to help people understand that when we talk about a new birth, for instance, in the context of Christianity, we often talk about being born again. And I always want people to get, perhaps at some point, the fact that we get born again more than once. That as long as you live this life, as long as you are human in this human body, that there are opportunities for new birth and being born again and again and again. And so my question to you was other than the times that you felt that you could have died or should have died, were there ever times that you felt that you weren't going to make it?
That's a deep question as well. Um, I can tell you absolutely in my sobriety, even. Um, so, I'll like the very honest answer to that is that, and I mentioned that motherhood presents challenges that I didn't know were in there, right? Um, and sometimes I think I'm not going to make it through that successfully. Now, let's take a moment to recognize the arrogance in just that thought. However, though, that is the thing that I struggle with now is becoming the parent that I want to be so that I provide my children with a mechanism, with tools, with an understanding of what connection is. And I think that sometimes I can strive so hard to do that that I add to a pile of things in my life that can serve as stressors when looked at in a certain way, um, and create other types of breaks, in that attachment relationship. Um, and so it's sometimes I feel that I don't have a way out. And to hear you just now talk about um, how we have multiple rebirths, and that I get to God through different mechanisms than you get to God, but we still get to the same God, right? And that's the only thing that really matters. Um, and so we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the same rebirth, right? And it gives me hope in a sense that I hadn't really thought of it until just now. That if I've had all of these other iterations, I can have another one. So
Right. Mhm.
I don't think, another wise woman I know, she and I have talked frequently about how, we stop learning, you may as well start dying.
That's
Uh,
true. That's right.
I think that's
Mhm.
that's an interesting perspective. Um, so yes, there's been multiple times, and not just, there with a number of different crucial life essence issues. And there have been times like very early in my sobriety when I didn't think that I could make it without drinking. I just didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I had been doing it for a year and a half or so. And I thought, I'm done with this. This is not fun. This is how am I going to date? How am I going to have any kind of meaningful relationships? How am I going to have fun? How? Without drinking. I did not know at the time that what I was really asking was how am I going to find something other than drinking that turns that key?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
I need a different key to open that lock, right? And so as my relationship with my higher power has grown, I understand that I have that key at my disposal anywhere and anytime. And that if my defects, such as the parenting challenges that I come across, um, are not immediately removed when I ask, it is because they are serving a purpose. And that is where I get back to again to arrogance. I think that I know what needs to be done in order for my children to have the experience that God needs them to have, that they need to have in order to realize their own path and their own potential and their own like glorious star-studded pathway in this life, that luminous pathway that just the only one that you can walk that makes you feel that way, that you're in the right place.
Right. Right.
Who am I to say that I'm not doing that precisely and exactly as it's supposed to be?
Exactly. Exactly. There's a question that I've been asking everybody that I have been honored to have these conversations with. And I really, really, really am excited about hearing your response to this one. If you could have a conversation with that, I'm going to say 17, 18-year-old who went off to college, what would you say to her right now?
Wow. Just hang on. It's not a deep thing, but there are certain things that happen between the time that I went off to college and the time that I got sober. I was 30, almost 33 years old when I got sober. There were things that happened during that time frame that, had they not happened, had I been able to reach an arm back through time to my 18-year-old self and just say, no, no, never do it. Don't do it. One of the promises of the 12-step programs that I use to get me closer to my God says that we will not regret the past, nor will we wish to shut the door on it. And I can't regret the past. I just can't. So I will tell her, just keep it together. Just hold on. Walk your path and hold on. Because there is a light at the end, and it is a bright one. So get ready.
Yeah.
Get ready.
And that light is where you are now. And I know we've talked about your children and how blessed you are to be in their life and to have them in yours, but you're also impacting the world in other ways. Let's wrap up our conversation with hearing a little bit about what you're doing there.
Okay. Well, right now, as you know, because you were a key part of this for me, I left the entire profession that I was a part of when you and I met in a professional setting and became such close friends. So I was working as a chemist, and I had always worked as a chemist, and I was always fascinated with chemistry. And through that, in combination with my experiences, in combination with being tolerated sitting in my very good friend's office who listened to me chatter on for hours.
By the way, I never sent you a bill for those, those times.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I'll send you one sometime in the future. We'll trade it off that way.
You're right. Yes.
So, I traded in that profession for one that I felt I was called to do. So I am in a doctoral program pursuing a PhD in counseling psychology, which is a field that will allow me to grow in my engagement with the community around me, that will allow me to engage in populations who are experiencing one form or other of disadvantage and try to reach that arm out as it has been reached out to me. And when I get that degree, there may be some research involved, there may be practice involved, there may be therapy services involved, there may be community services involved. I don't know. All I know is that there is that I'm on the luminous path. I'm very clear about that. I'm on that luminous path. And it is, as I walk it, there will be, a little flower on a tree here, or a little berry over here, or a little something that's blowing on the path. And I just pick it up and I put it in my pocket, put it in my satchel. And I know that when I get to a certain point in that path, it'll become clear as to how all of those pieces fit together.
Yeah. That's so true. So true. I applaud you. I know the sacrifice that you have made, leaving, as we, call a good government job.
Right.
Uprooting you and your husband and your children, moving to a whole new part of the state and starting a whole new career. It's a mega sacrifice that you have made in order that you can follow, I believe, the mission of your life that you're committed to. And so I applaud you. This has been a wonderful conversation. It's stirring within me, and I know that it will touch the hearts of so many. that's what we're about. We're about speaking truth, and we're about exposing the flesh in some instances. And that's the only way that the rawness of life is going to propel us forward and let us know that we can get through that dark season, the dark night of the soul, perhaps, and we will come to the place of light. And for all of us who are committed to living the authentic life, the truth life, there will be many sacrifices that we have to make, and you've made that sacrifice. And I know, it's certainly worth the commitment, and that you're going to come out as a major transformer of society and one who speaks truth to power. I have no doubt about that. And that I just want to be around to see, when it happens, that's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really don't think of it as a sacrifice so much as a opportunity and a blessing,
Mhm,
and a uh, an opportunity to exercise my faith,
mhm.
because as they say, God is everything or God is nothing.